really am surprised that all of these, my fellow contestants up here, I guess would be the right word for it, given nobody pays attention to the clock. I'm surprised they show up because I would have thought after I did such a good job in beating them last week that they'd be a little bit afraid to do that.
Warning. The political trade features probabilities and perspectives about politicians, political parties, political outcomes, and political wagering. The political trade is rated NSFP, not safe for partisans.
The number one biggest game is with the kingdom of fame. It's like a race at the top because they want to be boss. They don't care who they step on as long as they get along. Politicians in my eyes.
Welcome back to The Political Trade, the podcast for people with a passion for politics, probability, and profits. I'm Jeff Joseph, editorial director of Luckbox magazine, hosting the podcast where conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, partisans and wingnuts all come together to make money betting on politics by trading in the prediction markets at predictit.org, the stock market for politics that trades 24/7. Today's South Carolina and Super Tuesday edition of The Political Trade features the trading wisdom of prediction market super trader Jason Pipkin. Jason will reveal one of his most effective trading tactics and also share his 3 favorite trades in the political prediction markets today. So, as always, to get the most out of this podcast, you should open up predictit.org, click on the Markets tab, which is in the top left, follow along, and leave your political ideologies at the door. As always, I'm joined by Mike Reddy. Mike is the editor of Luckbox magazine, a novice prediction market trader, and the producer of The Political Trade. Mike, you and I both gave back some profits last night trading the South Carolina debate.
Yeah, it was a painful night, to say the least, for me. Definitely had some trades that I thought would go a lot better than they actually did, but I'm sure we'll get into that as we go along here.
Well, yeah, and we're excited to have Jason Pipkin with us today to get us back on track. Jason has been trading on Predictit since May of 2016, and when he's not trading, he works in academic research in neuroscience as his day job, and he's been highly praised by our previous guest, Scott Supak. In fact, everyone we've talked to in the prediction market trading arena has mentioned Jason at one time or another.
He's a predicted celebrity, without a doubt.
We have a predicted celebrity with us today. So currently ranked in the top 60 in Predictit's all predictor leaderboard category for the last year. And over the last trailing 12 months, his ROI is 450%. So, hi, Jason. Thanks for joining us. We're going to ask you about your takeaways from last night's chaos, but first, 450%, how do you maintain numbers like that?
Hi, Jeff. Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me. I trade a lot of money back and forth all the time. I trade daily. I've been hooked on it for 3 years now, and eventually you get good at it.
Let me ask you this, Jason. So you've been trading since May of 2016.
That's right.
How long did it take for you to become a daily trader, or was that pretty early on in that process?
I was checking the site daily, probably by the summer of 2016. And I wasn't any good at it then, but I'd always been interested in politics to begin with and a news addict, as it were. And this was a way to sort of monetize that. But I wouldn't consider myself a day trader really until the latter part of 2016, 2017, when I started taking it more seriously. For the first chunk of 2016, I was on the site a lot, but I wasn't doing as much trading.
But yet now you're trading how often each week?
I mean, all day, several hours a day. It's a second job for me.
It is a second job, but it's a second job that, as you mentioned to me earlier offline, represents your primary income, right?
It certainly has, at least for last year and definitely this year so far.
Yeah, there is a universe of super traders, and we won't get into the numbers, but we know that there is a universe of super traders on Predictit that are earning 6 figures, and then there's another handful, or not handful, but a significant amount that are earning between 50 to 100,000 trading and doing it not as a full-time gig. So that's what compelled us as well. We're at the intersection at Luckbox magazine of probability, life, and money. We're political freaks as well, probability geeks, and we're at that same intersection. But we're learning as we trade. Mike and I gave back some profits that we were fortunately lucky enough to achieve every week so far this year. Mm-hmm. We gave some back last night, but I think you fared differently.
I had a great night last night. I'll tell you the story. So the So I made a lot of money in those, the speaking time markets and the mention markets and that sort of thing. Or maybe I kind of broke even the mention markets. But the way you trade these speaking time markets, or the way I trade them,
let
is
me interrupt you only because Mike and I are listening with bated breath. That's where we both gave back money last night in the
Yes.
speaking time. Even though the prior week, Scott Supak, who you know well, another super trader, warned us that those markets are really a crapshoot. But we did not heed his advice, and we went in anyways and gave back some. But you've got some secrets for us, so tell us what
Sure.
we should have done.
Yeah, so the markets, to set it up for the listeners, are, just who's going to speak the most, and it's based on the New York Times tracker of speaking time, which plays live during the debate, so you can watch it, and then you can follow along with the debate too. And my strategy is, when they call on someone, you buy them, you sell it for a few cents more, and that's it. There's a little bit more to it. There's, someone attacks someone, they're probably going to get a response. There was a whole lot of that last night. So you could play that way. The game becomes having the fastest source of information. So you have to have a fast stream. And I'm a cable cutter. I don't even own a TV. Until yesterday, I was like, all right, I got to get a TV, because it turns out that broadcast television is like 30 seconds faster than any stream you're going to get over the internet.
And to be clear, you're not trading the outcome. You are just scalping a couple pennies here and there based on real-time market information coming in.
Yeah, so for the first 2/3 of the debate, I'm scalping pennies, and then in the back third, I'm going bigger and getting bigger flips. So there was that time where Bloomberg was ahead in speaking time, and then he kept being ahead, and then they called on him. And when they called on him, and not called on Bernie in the interim, I went big on Bloomberg, sold him at 50. He waited there. The price waited there for a bit. They called him on again, bought him 60, sold 70, exited. Then I was able to buy back into Bernie and take Bernie up. So, I've seen so many of these speaking time markets where someone comes back to win the last half hour that you never want to hold in that last half hour.
And we made the parallel on our last episode that speaking time was the equivalent to time of possession in football.
Yeah.
And sometimes, those on defense are running the clock longer. And everyone expected Sanders to be on defense, and that's how it played out. He ended up with more than 15 minutes and led in speaking time. Klobuchar and Bloomberg were close behind at 13 minutes, just only seconds apart. And way behind the pack was Steyer, who only came in with 7 minutes speaking time.
Yeah, Steyer was free money. He's always free money for and it was him versus Yang always for least. But without Yang, it was always going to be Steyer.
Yeah. So that sort of perfectly segues into the bad trade that Jeff and I made yesterday. Steyer was not in the last debate. We thought that because he was going to be in this one, he was going to come swinging. He had to make some sort of impression with the audience. So we took the no position on Steyer in the least speaking market, and we paid for it.
That'll do it.
We suffered big time.
I mean, the issue, he did come out swinging. He took a few shots, but the problem is that no one really cares about Tom Steyer, so that the moderators never ask him as many questions as they ask the others. And he's worse at interrupting. He's always been worse at interjecting, and interjecting is how you really build up speaking time.
And that's what was going on last night. In fact, the moderators came under a lot of criticism this morning. Everyone from Mika Brzezinski on Morning Joe to Meghan McCain on The View, and Donna Brazil, former DNC chair, Greg Gutfeld on Fox, Trevor Noah, Comedy Central. Everybody was panning the moderator's performance, basically for segments like this.
Do we think health care for all, Pete, is some kind of radical communist idea? Do we think raising the minimum wage to a living wage? Do we think building the millions of units of affordable housing that we need? Do we think raising taxes on billionaires is a radical idea?
Let's talk
Do you
about
think
what's radical
criminal
about that
justice
plan.
reform
Senator,
is a
please.
radical
Senator,
idea?
The things you just named
Do we think
are
immigration reform?
Now, I hear Steyer in the background. I don't know about you. I think Steyer is doing most of the speaking here.
Yeah, they might want to recount his time.
Yes, yeah, we're going to ask for a recount, but it goes on and on like that. So it's a fair question. When everybody's speaking, is everybody speaking? Are they getting points for that?
It turns out the New York Times was horrible at counting crosstalk. So they would just sort of pick someone, and you had to pay attention to who they were tracking. There's sort of a little blinking box for who they're counting at the moment. But I mean, I think I saw a quote today from the New York Times media critic. I think it's James Poniewicz. He's a Polish last name that I'd butcher, but look it up. And he said that the debate caught everyone's attention the way that 7 car alarms going off in your neighborhood at once catches your attention. Really noisy, but kind of annoying.
The question that comes out of this is not, who impressed you the most and who made the best case as the candidate most likely to beat Trump. What's your take on that?
My take, with any debate bump, you want to look, is there a clear winner that the sort of cable media narrative will congeal around? And there was just not last night. Bernie did fine. He didn't take on as much water as some people thought he might. Biden did okay. Warren was okay. Bloomberg was bad, but not a disaster. Steyer was a non-factor as usual. Pete and Amy were about par for the course. And since the story was just the noise, I mean, I don't think it changed much. And the markets kind of reflected that.
It's somewhat of a continuation of what we saw before. The last debate, I mentioned to Scott that my take was that Warren missed an opportunity and that she really should have been going after the front runner, Bernie Sanders, because there was plenty of time to take on Bloomberg. And then we saw more of that yesterday. In fact, Chris Matthews had a similar comment post-debate last night.
I don't know what Warren is up to. I'll find out tonight. Maybe she seems to be much more concerned about knocking Bloomberg out of the race than she is in taking on the front runner, the clear front runner now, Bernie Sanders. I don't know the politics there, what she's doing there.
Echoing Chris Matthews' sentiment, but in a way that doesn't bring up a Nazi reference, so I don't have to apologize for my words the next week. I think he's right. It is over, right? I mean, no one has really laid a glove on Bernie in 2 consecutive debates. As if Yang was still around to share the math with us, he would show us that he is certainly walking into that convention with a plurality. I think there's very little question about that at this point. What are these other candidates sticking around for? Or why are they not taking on Bernie head to head?
Well, I think you saw a few go after Bernie head to head. Bloomberg did a little bit. Biden did a little bit. Pete, obviously, in that clip we listened to. I think that Bernie will take a punch in South Carolina this weekend. It seems like Joe is going to win, and it's possible Joe wins big. And it's possible that Bernie loses a lot of southern states on Super Tuesday and maybe doesn't get big edges in some of the other Midwestern or Midwestern-ish states, or even maybe he's held down in delegates in Massachusetts by Warren. He'll run up the score out west, but that won't be counted on Tuesday night. So the narrative will kind of be that Joe Biden is sort of within striking distance of Bernie, and he will emerge as the Bernie alternative in this story.
I think it's a fair read. I think it's also interesting to note how Biden, being a no-show in all these debates to date, has set the bar so low that the slightest effort on his part was greeted with a rave. I mean, he was strongly touted as being one of the winners of last night's debate, and I think it's predominantly just because he showed up. I mean, segments like this one to follow just didn't speak that well to him. He didn't have energy that captivated anybody.
The fact is, here's the deal. I'm not out of time. You spoke over time, and I'm going to talk. Got to deal with the institutional racism.
Mr. Vice President. Mr. Vice.
I know how you cut me off all the time, but I'm not going to be quiet anymore, okay?
Mr. Steyer.
Prevent North Korea from launching missiles to take them down, and if we don't, look, why am I stopping? No one else stops. I guess the only way you do this is jump in and speak twice as long as you should.
So he thinks out loud, which is interesting. But my point is, he certainly lacks the energy of Bernie Sanders, which is engaging so many voters right now. I really question if he's going to, be the candidate that people are rallying around as a post or as an alternative candidate to Bernie Sanders coming into the convention.
He may just be the moderate left standing by the time we get to the later March and April states. Or maybe he doesn't do as well on Super Tuesday as he could. Maybe he has a weak showing in the South. He wins, but it's not as many delegates as he should be getting. And that would be a Bernie win.
What would you think about Buttigieg? Is he still a factor? I mean, he did take a run at Bernie.
Look, if you want to keep the House in Democratic hands, you might want to check with the people who actually turned the House blue. 40 Democrats who are not running on your platform. They are running away from your platform as fast as they possibly can.
I think that Pete, I mean, it's upside for Pete at this point. I'm sure he'll have some future in the party. I struggle seeing him getting the nomination because he doesn't have any black support, and it's been his problem since last June, and it's going to continue being his problem. And even in a contested convention scenario, how are you going to end up landing on Pete, who will probably not have shown any significant black support to that date? I don't really see it. Now, I think maybe he drops mid-March. I'm not sure. I think he wants to compete in some of the Midwestern states that are coming up then, but very unlikely he gets a plurality, and I think has low contested convention equity. That's my take on Pete.
Right, low contested convention equity. That probably sums him up really well. His last polling data showed 4% African American support in South Carolina.
Better than zero.
It's better than zero. So in South Carolina, then does Biden emerge in South Carolina? He seems to think so, as evident by...
If you don't win South Carolina, can Joe Biden, former Vice President of the United States, carry on in this campaign with any hope of securing the nomination? You're going to win.
I'm going to win South Carolina.
By how much?
I don't know.
Does it matter?
I think it's just important that I win. Just like
1 point is enough. 1
point is enough, but I think I can win by a lot more than that.
I mean, I think, yeah, Joe's probably right. We had a couple polls this morning. We had the well-respected Palmetto poll, or at least seems to be well-respected. I don't actually know much about it. That had him up double digits. Another poll from East Carolina University had him up single digits. And the market's taken him down north of 80 cents, which is crazy because if you had traded after Nevada, you would have been able to get Joe Biden in the 40s.
The NBC Marist College poll has a narrower lead. Biden by 27%.
Yeah, they do, although that's mainly a pre-Nevada poll. If you look at the dates.
Right. That's right.
So the post-Nevada polls have been bigger for him.
Any early thoughts on the VP stakes?
The VP market is very, very amusing.
We're not laughing at on this end, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Tell us what you like there.
Well, I mean, I don't know who I like really. I mean, it's just you have, I don't know how many candidates in there, almost 20 or so, or around there.
Yep.
There's a pretty good chance it's not anyone on this list. And the market's pricing the list near $1. So I'm sure Scott talked about negative risk at some point.
He did, and he has nose all over this market. But Scott also talked us into a penny trade, a value trade on Tammy Duckworth, which
I love Tammy as well. Tammy's a good pick for Joe.
Yeah,
he's a good pick for Joe, I think. I don't know about Bernie.
That was the reasoning that you've got older white male candidates that are likely to take the top spot, and that they'll be looking for some diversity on the ticket, both with gender and race, and that Tammy Duckworth is a great candidate from there.
That's the thing about this market. It's always going to tempt you because everything's going to be kind of cheap, and you're always going to think, man, I could buy so many shares of so-and-so. And they could do it, and you would make a lot. And people are going to make those trades and are going to win that way, which is great. But the best way to make money is just try to negative risk the whole thing. You can flip shares in negative risk, sell for a penny, buy them back for a penny cheaper if you want. Otherwise, I mean, they're pricing the field at like 10 cents maximum, like anyone not on the list. And that, I think, is a great value.
Well, swing trading is really your primary approach, and that's really what we want to focus on today. As you know, we follow the format in the Political Trade podcast of Luckbox magazine, which is our publication on life, money, and probabilities. And part of that magazine format is that we always have something that's evergreen and educational. So we ask each super trader that joins our episodes of the Political Trade to share a primary trading tactic that they use. And we're going to come right back in a short break and ask you to tell us take us to school. So we'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Jason Pipkin, our super trader, joining us on the political trade. And we're just about to walk into our tactics section where Jason's going to share with us a trading tactic that he relies on that helped him achieve these 450% returns over the last 12 months. You can follow Jason on Twitter, and you should follow Jason on Twitter. He's very prolific in terms of his posts. He is Jipkin, Jipkin on Twitter. And Jason also has a website that he posts some of his lengthier musings about prediction market trading. It's highly educational. It's predictingpolitics.com. So please follow Jason at predictingpolitics.com and at Jipkin on Twitter. Hey, Jason, welcome back. And when you were speaking to us offline about how you approach these markets, we learned right away that you don't fall into the category of being a position trader. And that seems to be consistent with most of the super traders that are performing extremely well in prediction markets at predicted.org. You're not about holding these binary options to their outcome. It's not about buying something, at a decimal and selling it out at $1. It's trading the swings in between. In trading, we call that a swing trader. And we know that you're particularly focused on election markets and swing trading during the election. So tell us a little bit more. What's our tactic for the day as you take us to school?
Well, you introduced that absolutely correctly. If you were a sports gambler or making a bet on sports, you would walk into the book. You would say, I want the Patriots to win the Super Bowl next year. The bookie would give you some line, and you would put your money down and walk away. On Predict It, you can put your money down, but you don't have to walk away. If it becomes more likely, for instance, that Bernie Sanders is going to be the nominee, and you bought Bernie Sanders shares, you could sell them for a profit. Becomes less likely, you could sell them for a smaller loss than if you held all the way to the end and you lost. And the markets go up and down quite a bit with changes in news and results. So capitalizing on those swings is highly profitable if you know what you're doing. You can do it for all sorts of swings. I'll talk about election markets because I think that's where, if you're a new trader and you don't want to spend a lot of time like I do all day on the website, you just want to sit down on election night as you would maybe normally and just watch the results come in and react to them. What are some things you would do in order to capitalize on the information you're getting? So I would say there are a few things to pay attention to. You would probably want to focus on an election that you feel like you know something about. So I don't trade on foreign elections that I know nothing about because I have no idea where to find information about them. But if you're living in a particular state, maybe you feel you have an understanding of that state. Maybe you're in North Carolina, for instance, and you feel like you have a really good grasp of the North Carolina electorate. You want to pay attention to North Carolina. And then what you should know then about the state is you should know the demographics, what kinds of people make up the electorate. You should know where they live, the sort of political geography, what counties they're in. And that will give you an ability to say, oh, this county is a heavily black county, and it's coming in pretty strong for Biden right now and kind of weak for Bloomberg. That means, Biden's maybe getting more delegates and has a higher chance of winning than I thought beforehand. And you can react to that information. And then the other source of information, besides just looking at the results, knowing where they're coming from, and knowing who's casting those votes, is just Twitter. So there are lots of election analysts on Twitter, guys that with varying degrees of skill will be talking about who's doing well and who's doing poorly. So, Nate Cohn from the New York Times is a great follow. Dave Wasserman used to be better, but he's still pretty good. Sometimes he gets a little ahead of himself with his calls, but he analyzes results as they come in. Those analysts plus the general sort of reaction to the results from election people and reporters in general will give you a sense for sentiment for how a race, this looks good for so-and-so, is turning out on election night.
Let me ask you this. So in the last episode of the podcast, Scott Supak was sort of detailing a lot of different elements of noise in the markets, things to listen to, things to not listen to. And he talked about a lot of predicted traders who are providing information both on the chat boards and on Twitter. Now, when you look or seek out information about these markets, do you pay any mind to other predicted traders, or are you primarily focused on election reporters and other sources like that?
For an election market on election night, the comment section is useless, and all the sharp traders and predicted aren't exactly going out posting tweets like, "Hey, this was way underpriced," or whatever. Everyone's buying. So on an election night, no.
I'll remind listeners that in each market, each contract in any given market, you can trade up to $850. That's the cap imposed by the predicted platform. Right. So when you're even trading to scalp 1 or 2 cents, it does add up over time, particularly if you're doing it on a frequent basis. And that seems to be a material part of your trading approach. Is that right?
Absolutely. So, I'll put in a share here, an offer here at 81 cents. I'll put in an offer for 1,000 shares. If I get them, I'll sell them for 82 cents. That's $10. If I do that 10 times today, then you make $100, right? So that adds up over time.
And that raises the question, because that becomes, how to implement the tactic, and it gets into bankroll management. And how do you decide on the size of your transaction? How much are you committing to a trade like that?
Sure. In a market like South Carolina, it's so liquid and so high volume that I'm going to be maxing all the time. If the market's not very liquid, there's no way I'm putting max offers out, because if something were to break against me, I would have nothing to sell into.
Well, thank you, Jason. We're going to take your lesson to heart and come right back after a short break and ask you about your favorite trades going into Super Tuesday. But first...
Want a little more luck in your life? Get Luckbox, the control freak's guide to life, money, and probability, named the best new magazine of 2019. Luckbox is a must-read for side hustlers, gamblers, entrepreneurs, and active investors. Each issue features best bets from prediction market experts, as well as timely sports wagering, stocks, options, futures, and cryptocurrency trading ideas. You can buy Luckbox on newsstands, but with this special offer, listeners of The Political Trade can receive a 10-issue digital subscription absolutely free. Just visit getluckbox.com to receive the award-winning magazine right in your inbox. Don't rely on luck. Get Luckbox for free today. Learn more at getluckbox.com.
Well, we're back with Jason Pipkin, our super trader, and in each episode we ask our expert trader for actionable advice on specific markets. Jason, what do you have for us?
All right, I have 3 trades. 2 of them are related, and they basically boil down very simply. So for Super Tuesday, the value of shares in all the Super Tuesday markets and in all the state markets are going to depend to some extent on the results in South Carolina. So these are trades you might consider when you expect different things to happen in South Carolina. And it's simple as this. If Joe Biden has a big win in South Carolina, his shares are going to go up site-wide. If Bernie Sanders pulls out a win in South Carolina, his shares are going to go like on a rocket site-wide. Where would you want to take advantage of this? Well, if you want to take advantage of Joe Biden, and with the caveat that the markets are, especially today, are starting to price this in a little bit, so be wary. Places like Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia are all going to be very interesting states. If Joe Biden has a big enough win on South Carolina that maybe the Bloomberg curious among his African-American supporters will come back to him, those could become very competitive states. If, on the other hand, you think Bernie is going to have a tremendous night, then Bernie is probably well on his way to sweeping the nomination. And in that case, a lot of later states that vote in June and May, would be good pickups for Bernie right now. So you could look at him in Delaware and in DC and New Jersey, places like this where he's a little bit off his highs. He'd likely rocket right back up.
Well, you're actually articulating 2 trades for us then. The first being
yes, exactly.
Buying Joe in the South. Basically, if Biden turns in a good performance for South Carolina, You think he'll pick up traction in other southern states and other southern contests, and that there's some value there. Any particular among Tennessee, Oklahoma, North Carolina, Texas, Alabama, any of those markets jump out at you?
So Alabama, if he wins South Carolina, he's going to win Alabama. Probably. In fact, if he wins South Carolina big, I think Alabama will go 90 cents plus. And it may go, it's been along the ride today. Today I sold Alabama in the mid 80s, for instance.
And he's up to 78 cents right now, which is up 9 cents on the day. He's having a big day there.
Yeah. So that's one where he would be expected to win if he has a great night in South Carolina, for sure. Then you have states like Tennessee where it's a little bit unclear, but he probably has an edge, and he's priced that way now. He wasn't earlier this week. And then there's Oklahoma and Texas. Oklahoma is an interesting state. It's not the same as it was in 2016. If you can read another trader named RJ, I believe Scott mentioned last week, he has a lot of tweets about Oklahoma and how the process changes have made it a little bit less favorable to Bernie, and his demographic base isn't quite as well suited to Oklahoma as it used to be. That said, Bernie has plenty of equity there. But it's somewhere where Biden could potentially surprise and may take a lead off the back of a South Carolina.
Well, the market's starting to read that way. Joe's having a good day in Oklahoma. He's up 9 cents, up to 32 cents. But that's still there's still a lot of value there at 32 if you're looking for some upset or upside surprise.
There is, and then Texas is would be the big one. I expect Texas would be a highly contested market or a high volume market. We've had some polling this week, and it shows Joe and Bernie basically tied there, with Bloomberg sort of cutting into Joe's support. In fact, there's a poll today that basically showed without Bloomberg in the race, Joe was beating Bernie. So you can imagine a big Joe win in South Carolina. The market may think that means Bloomberg's voters will go back to Joe, and the market would then push Joe ahead of Bernie in Texas. It's possible. I don't know if that's definitely what's going to happen. I will say I have some money betting. I have 360 Bernie no at 25 cents right now, and I'm looking to sell them at 45. We'll see if it happens.
Well, Texas has been a kind of a crazy market. That 30-day range on Joe has been from 8 cents to 65 cents, and currently.
Yeah, let me tell you. I mean, the good sharps were making big Joe plays after New Hampshire, and I was not one of them. But some people out there have some good positions.
There's some big swings there, but today 37 cents, up a little bit on the day, and so basically Joe has coattails in the South if he performs well in South Carolina. That's the first trade, and then you moved on. You moved east a little bit from the South when you were speaking to Bernie. Is that the second opportunity?
Yeah. So let's say that Bernie has a great night in South Carolina. Maybe he only narrowly loses or even wins. In that scenario, Joe Biden would plummet to the ground. He'd be considered done everywhere. Bloomberg would probably go up in the South in place of Joe, and Bernie would pick up value in later contests, like I mentioned, Delaware, DC, New Jersey, things that vote late and where Bernie might not be favored in a head-to-head with anybody, but where if he's the only one left standing because everyone else has dropped out, he'd be a default win.
So look for Bernie value in the East if he sneaks out a win in South Carolina, and particularly in markets like DC, New Jersey, and Delaware. Moving on to the third trade, it's a Trump trade.
Yeah, why not?
Or a no Trump trade.
This is kind of a news trade. We've had the coronavirus in the news recently, and all of the experts seem to be saying that it's only a matter of time before we have local spread here in the United States. This would present a real crisis to Trump and would test his ability to manage such a crisis. And I don't have tremendous confidence in him. It also, especially given his remarks about the stock market and the media hyping up the virus in order to hurt his market. Anyway, he's nuts, but whatever. The other issue with the virus is that, I read that it could impact global supply chains or whatever. I don't know if this is true, but the idea would be that, I guess, if places start getting low on inventory because South Korea and China can't produce as much, then maybe, you have the stock market taking on more water, the economy sours a little bit, throw in some BS about the inverted yield curve. I don't know, maybe we start looking a little more pre-recession, and all of Trump's support that had been assumed based on the economy might start to erode. And in that case, the trade would be to bet against him winning in 2020.
So in the general election trade or market, Donald Trump is currently at 56, 57 cents today, hovering back and forth between that pricing. Sanders is at 32 cents. That seems to be a recent high, trading around 56, 57.
He is. This is very close to his all-time high.
Right.
Maybe it is his all-time high.
So you see a little downside value here. If there's any black swan activity in the coronavirus, any uptick in incidences or cases here in the U.S.
Yeah, I mean, this may be a gray swan. I mean, there's when the CDC is telling people, I had to talk to my daughters about what's going to happen when schools close. Okay, maybe it's going to happen. So, but again, all the knock-on effects, who knows? The reason I mentioned this as a trade is that at Trump at 57 cents, how much higher is he really going to get between now and say, beginning of August?
Exactly.
Right?
So there's a natural ceiling on this trade. That's why it is a smart trade. In fact, it's probably one we're going to play shortly after airing this podcast. I get it, right? There's a ceiling on Trump at 57. You don't see it going into the 60s. For certain.
He may get up to 60. He may. There's a lot of MAGA money, that I call it, will come on for him at some point or the other. But I don't expect him to see 60 plus until after his convention. But I could be wrong.
It's more than MAGA money. Actually, on Betfair in the UK, there are some general election platforms that have him close to 2-to-1 odds to win, which seems to be a real outlier. You'd expect this to be somewhere closer to 50-50.
I need to be able to play overseas.
Right, exactly. And I remind our listeners, you can open up your own Predictit account and get $20. In other words, make your first trade and with a $20 profit by simply going to predictit.org/promo/TPT20. That's TPT for the political trade. Use the promo code predictit.org/promo/TPT20. And they'll match the first $20 you drop into your account. So open an account with 20, you'll have 40, and you can make your no Trump trade today. Thank you, Jason. We're going to come right back after a quick break for your Luckbox of the week. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back with Jason Pipkin, our super trader, who's just walked us through his 3 favorite trades going into Super Tuesday, and now he's going to share his Luckbox of the week. If you're a regular listener, and if you know Luckbox magazine, you know that we feature a Luckbox in each issue. A Luckbox is well known to poker players, gamblers, traders. It's the undeserving recipient of a favorable outlier outcome, someone who got lucky and perhaps didn't deserve it. And we ask our guests each week to share their Luckbox of the week in the prediction markets. Jason, who do you have for us?
So I have one that's a little bit technical, but it ties back in with what I was talking about with swing trading on elections before. So we just had the Nevada caucuses, and we had a market for who would be second place. And what happened is that the first few results came in, and Joe Biden was second in this measure called county delegates, which is what happened. You go to the caucus, the precinct, you elect delegates to a county convention. The news networks tally up the county delegates across everyone that's reported, and that's sort of who's winning, or one measure of it, right? And the very early results, Joe Biden was ahead, or he was in second place in county delegates. And that market moved very strongly. It moved all the way into the 80s, the upper 80s at one point for Joe Biden. And it eventually came back from that. But this move was really poor and wrong. And yet Joe Biden ended up winning. So this is why I consider it a Luckbox, because people overbought and ended up getting paid anyway.
Well, Jason, I wish we had you on earlier before last night, where Mike and I both gave back a little bit of our profits, but thank you for your 3 trades that you shared with us today. We're obviously looking forward to having you back because we know you have a lot to share with us and our listeners. So thanks again, Jason. And it's important to everyone out there that you subscribe to the Political Trade Podcast, because the next edition of the podcast will drop as soon as we get our arms around the Super Tuesday results on March 3rd and the prediction markets settle. So we'll be joined by a very special guest that will focus on best bets going into the March 10th primaries. Of course, Idaho, Mississippi, North Dakota, and Missouri, which has 68 delegates, are coming up on Super Tuesday, as well as, on March 10th. Also Washington State with 89 delegates, and of course the all-important Michigan market with 125 delegates on March 10th. So we'll be back with best bets going into the March 10th primaries and Super Tuesday results. So, Jason, thank you again for being with us, and we do hope to have you back.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
So once again, this is Jeff Joseph.
And I'm Mike Reddy.
Join us soon on The Political Trade.